Going on, monsters? It's a hot season. It's been a hot week with the hottest temperatures rising. And here I am serving you more hot conversations here on HOT, heard on Thursdays, the show that made FM radio talk only on summer's hottest monster, RX93.1. Hi, what's going on? I'm your host, JC Teves. Thank you for joining us this evening. So, I got to ask you all, what's the one thing that can make you truly known as a person? Especially a person of another country. Yeah, it's not their history, it's not a Wikipedia page, it's not their Twitter feed, it's not even their music, movies, or the clothes that they wear. It's food, right? The food that they eat and the way they eat them. That will probably teach you more about who they are and what they've been through than a whole Netflix documentary could tell you. That is, if you are willing to learn, of course. Our guest tonight is a renowned chef, foodie, TV and YouTube host, and traveler, and his curiosity always gets the best of him. He has learned about food and people from eating all around the world. He's put those insights, observations, anecdotes, and recipes in a new book entitled The Gospel of Food: Lessons I Learned from Eating Across the World. You know him as the host of the TV shows Let's Do Lunch on GMA News TV and Curiosity Got the Chef on the Lifestyle Channel. He also hosts web shows on YouTube like Not Safe for the Hungry and Straight Guy K-Drama Reviews. For the Philippine Star, he writes the column The Bacon Man Cometh. He has also authored two previous books, Curiosity Got the Chef, The Cookbook, and So You Want to Be a Chef. The last time he was here on the show, it was already virtually. This was last October 1, and he's back here with us tonight, live from home, preaching the gospel of food, the ever curious, ever learning Chef Sharwin Tee. Chef Sharwin, what's going on? Welcome
Yo,
back.
JC, it's nice to
How are
be
you?
back.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm always excited when it comes to guesting on Monster. I'm very excited to share the gospels, as they say.
Yeah. Last time we had this talk in October, as I mentioned earlier, we were talking K dramas and everything because you just started getting into it because of the pandemic. How is that going? I mean, besides your food stuff, how's the K drama going strong? Are you watching Vincenzo? That's what everyone's talking about right now?
Yeah, I'm actually up to about episode 13, so
Okay.
I'll probably have a straight guy review next week for
Okay.
Vincenzo. But so far, I'm enjoying it. I get why people love it so much. I get
Mm-hmm.
the hype, basically. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else that you've been doing? Have you picked up anything new? So last year K drama, this year anything else?
Yeah, this year I'm hoping to include more cooking videos. I've been a little lax with the cooking videos, I gotta admit.
Mm.
And I've been very interested in creating recipes inspired by K dramas. So
Mm.
usually when I do a review of a K drama, I include like what favorite food I saw on the show. And I think this year I can add more videos about recipes that are born from these K dramas that I review. That way, I can tie in both of my interests together, right?
I love it. I love
Cooking
it.
and K drama. Yeah.
Before we get talking about your book and what else you've been up to, I want to talk about one of your more recent Facebook posts because you said you haven't been making videos as often, but you are still very active on your social media pages. And in one of them, you were craving for I hope I'm saying this right, Mapo Tofu. Mapo
Yes.
Tofu. And you were asking your followers if they had any cravings for tofu as well. So first of all, did you satisfy your Mapo Tofu craving? Were you able to do that?
Unfortunately, not yet. I haven't had the chance to buy tofu. And I've been trying to save up on my Szechuan peppercorns. I don't have a lot of them, and you need a good amount of Szechuan peppercorns because mapo tofu is the best thing about it is that tongue numbing spice that comes
Yeah.
from the Szechuan peppercorn. So,
Okay.
maybe if I find a restaurant that makes a really good one, I can probably order instead of making one. Let's see.
Okay.
I'm still on the hunt for like the best. Mapo Tofu,
Got
um,
it.
in the metro that is not made by me.
Okay, okay. Yeah, actually, I was gonna bring that up. You know, as someone like you, since you are a chef and you're talented and you're good at it, when you have a craving, don't you just say, "Oh, I'm just gonna cook this." You don't have to order. I'm just gonna make this. Do you do you ever feel that way because you know how to do every? I mean, you can cook a lot of things.
There are some, the advantages, like very early on, during the lockdown, like when nothing was open, I definitely had to fend for myself. Um, but there are certain things that I refuse to learn because I just love to eat that dish, right? Because sometimes when you learn about the dish, you take away the mystery, um, and then it's just not as delicious as before. I know
Mm.
that sounds weird, but
Nah, I get it.
so yeah, there are some dishes I avoid trying to learn. And that way I can just order delivery and really just enjoy it for itself and not really think too much.
Yeah, last year as well, when we were talking about the outlook of the restaurant industry, since we are talking about delivery, in the last few months, I would venture to say it's picked up greatly, and I just want to get maybe some insights from you, Chef Shar, about the because last year we were talking about how the transition that restaurants had to make from dine in to take out. Any thoughts about the recent regulations and how they've kind of been more lenient, but then sometimes they go back to being strict. You know, the whole MECQ, GCQ, ECQ kind of fiasco that's happening right now. Any thoughts on that?
Well, it's definitely a killer. The one thing that a lot of industries can't take, especially the food and beverage industry, is uncertainty. That's the worst thing. Like, you know, restaurants can open through typhoons. Um, restaurants can handle certain financial crises, but uncertainty is difficult, right? Like if we can open this week and then close next week, and then we don't know when we're going to open again, that's tremendously difficult for
Mm.
restaurants. I think the only thing I remember, last year we were talking about how restaurants should switch or at least highlight their delivery services. And
Mm.
I see that now I think 80% of restaurants are doing deliveries. And now what I'm noticing is that the people have changed their behaviors as well. So a lot more people are ordering on delivery as well. So it took a while for the dining public to catch up to the restaurants. But I think now a lot of restaurants get their income from delivery, which is a good thing. Um, Maybe until towards the end of the year, at least let's try to keep the COVID situation under control,
Mm.
uh, and sacrifice dining in a little bit
Okay.
and do a little bit more delivery.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing your insights on that, Chef Shar. Let's talk about another thing. Okay, before we move on to your book, a hot topic right now, which you actually posted about also on Facebook, is the comments made by the a Filipino Nordic chef about Filipino food. I think it's kind of went semi viral online, but you had some pretty strong opinions about it. Um, so basically, our the chef was saying about how our Filipino food is not so. What's the how would you how would you say it,
Well,
Chef Char?
he said it in their language, in the Norwegian language. So,
Yeah,
but the translation is basically his first sentence was Filipino food is very bad, right? That's his first sentence,
pretty
right?
much,
So,
pretty much.
so I'm for me, I think that we recently covered this on our podcast
Mm,
called the Sinigang, and we were just talking about how everyone is entitled to their own opinion. Whether you can like a certain cuisine, you can hate a certain cuisine. That's not really a problem. I think the bigger deal here is that he used the words bad, right?
mm-hmm.
So there's a certain when you use the word bad, then you mean there's a certain good, right? And that supposes now that you're ranking. There's certain there's a certain standard that you have to follow. Um, and that doesn't really work for cuisine. No, you can never say that one cuisine is better than the other. You can't say that this is the standard for a good cuisine and this is the standard for a bad cuisine. You can't do that because
Mm.
it's taste. It's literally taste.
Yeah.
So, you know, he did apologize. He issued an apology saying that he was saying it was a subjective thing. It was his opinion.
Mm.
And I think that's where the issue came from, right? If it was your
Right.
opinion, then you should have
Mhm.
said, "I don't like it personally." Um,
Yes.
and I think this is how I would love it if all of our writers um, and all of our comments on Facebook um, this is how I'd like people to comment on food. Really,
Mm.
don't say it's bad. Don't say it's you know worse than this, right? Just
Right.
say
Right.
whether you liked it or not, because
Got.
then people, when they read your post, right, and they see, I didn't like it, then your first thought would be, why didn't you like it? Because maybe I like extra sour things, and if you don't
Mm.
like extra sour things, then I'll try it, right? But if you
Yeah.
say this restaurant is bad, then everyone will not go to the restaurant, which is not what we need right now.
True.
Every
True.
restaurant needs our help. So
Yeah.
instead, just say like, I didn't enjoy the food because it was too spicy, or I didn't enjoy the food because I thought it was too salty. Then at
Yeah.
least people will know, right? Like, oh well, I like salty stuff, so I might go there, right? So
Right.
I,
As
I think
since we're on the topic, when it comes to food reviewing, whether it be from food critics or just the general public, posting on their Instagram, like I went to this place, I went to this place. I mean, it's very subjective, right? When it comes to food reviewing, but is there an objective way of judging food ever? Is there some sort of like grading system where you could say this objectively is a delicious food item, delicious meal? Is that possible, or is it always going to be subjective? Is it like the
for me,
movies?
it can't. It
Yeah, you
really
can.
can't be, because every one of us grows up in a certain atmosphere, right, in a
Right.
certain context,
Mm.
and that already colors your decision, right? You can't be objective because you grew
Mhm.
up different. So two people, let's say they undergo the same training for restaurant critiquing, right?
Right.
But one grows up in a first world country and one grows up in a third world country. That's completely different already.
Mm.
Just from the mentality of one grew up in a country where they were historically colonizers, and then this one grows up in a country where they were historically being colonized. Your mindsets are completely different already to begin with. Um, so an interesting one of the chapters in my book, interestingly enough, talks about that. Talks about my adventures in Russia. So when I was cooking in Russia and eating the food there, um, I one of the dishes I made for the Filipino Food Festival was chicken adobo,
Mm.
and it's like one of my best dishes, and nobody ate it, and I felt
Mhm.
so insulted, right? I felt so
Okay.
sad.
Oh
Like,
no.
who doesn't like chicken adobo?
I
Um,
know.
and then beside my chicken adobo was ginataang kalabasa with hipon.
Okay.
And that one we had to refill a couple of times. Like everyone
Mm.
was eating that. And I was like, why would you want to eat that when I have chicken adobo right here? And it turns out it's a lot of it is how our guests grew up, right? They grew up in
Yeah.
Russia,
Mm.
where coconut milk is not abundant, shrimps are not abundant. They
Mm.
don't eat a lot of spicy food. So this version, which is a spicy coconut milk dish with shrimps
Yeah.
and squash, is something that is so appealing to them, something so interesting to them.
Yeah.
Whereas a chicken adobo is basically a chicken stew, and during all those communist years, all they had was chicken, right?
Yeah.
So automatically why would they want it? They've had it for years.
Mhm.
So really, it's context, right? How can you say now that my chicken adobo was a better dish or a worse dish than my ginataang kalabasa?
Yeah, I mean, you can really learn, as we mentioned in the introduction earlier, just from just from that example alone, you can really learn a lot from a person's country or culture just from what they choose to eat, right? In a way, and that's something that your book, well, your books and your well, every not just your books, but your podcast and your shows, they all kind of tackle that kind of community learning from food. And your latest, let's talk about your latest, the Gospel of Food: Lessons I Learned from Eating Across the World. First of all, you were able to release a book during a difficult year again, so congratulations on that. But what was the inspiration behind that, Chef Sharp? Because when we talked last, I don't think you even mentioned that you were writing a new book. So in the last, well, October, no, well, I guess it's almost been a year, but a year you've put out another uh, work. So how did that come about?
Yeah, well, actually, the book has been, I've been trying to write this book for 2.5 years, right?
Mm.
And I just needed, the being on lockdown just reinforced that I had to really sit down and finish it, right?
Mm.
Because I've always been, I'll write a chapter here, I'll write a chapter there, I'll write a recipe here, I'll write a recipe there, but it was never really fully finished. And then when I was locked down and there were a couple of weeks where I had nothing to do, um, it just hammered home the idea that, you know what, it's time to finish it, right? Like,
Right.
you can't just keep leaving it around forever. And the
Okay.
other thing is, this is a lot of this is about my travels, and I think everybody is missing, the ability to travel right now. And
Very
I
true.
think my hope is that this book is a substitute, something to get you by.
Yeah.
I hope that people will travel with me in this book, until we can actually travel for real.
Yeah. To live vicariously through your words in a way. What countries or cities in particular did you tackle in this book? I don't know if did you tackle just certain, did you try to tackle as much as possible? Did you stick to a certain region, just for our listeners who want to maybe buy this book and say, I want to see what Chef Sharp's been up to during his travels around the world.
What's amazing is, and I promise I didn't do this. I didn't
Intentionally.
force this to. I didn't force this to happen. But
Got
part of the book's idea is that these are 10 different lessons that I learned about cooking
Mm.
while eating other people's food. Right. So it's
Mm.
not even lessons that I learned in culinary school,
Got it.
because I tackled that in my previous book. So
Hmm.
these are lessons that I learned while eating other people's food, while hearing other people's stories. So what happened was, when I started looking at what these lessons are, I found that each place that I went to had a certain theme to it. And so, if you're going to read the book, each chapter is basically, except for one chapter, each
Mm.
chapter is basically one place. And throughout that place, I learned one important lesson.
Ah.
So it's amazing how it turned out. No? It, I didn't really think that would happen.
Mm.
But like, I have great chapters on Hong Kong,
Hmm.
on Penang, on Singapore, on Russia, Australia, but also locally, like Pampanga, um, and one in Metro Manila. Well, it's a mix of Metro Manila and Cebu, right?
Cebu.
So it's very interesting because, like you said, everywhere I go, there's a lesson to be learned.
Hmm.
Uh, and most of the time, I didn't even have to cook to learn it. I just watched people cook, and then I asked them about their stories.
Mm.
um, One thing fun is, when you're with food, people seem to want to talk more.
Yeah.
And uh, and so I'm a curious person by nature, so I keep asking questions as we eat, as we cook. And
Hmm.
I find that they're more generous with their words when
Yeah.
we're faced with food, rather
Oh,
than sitting in front of them in front of a camera and doing an interview. They usually
yeah.
clam up. But when we're cooking, I'll ask them, and they would tell these stories, and a lot of these stories are really, really beautiful. I don't want to take credit actually for these stories. I just
Mhm.
wrote them, but somebody else told me these
Mm.
stories.
I mean, I think it's safe to assume that a lot of our listeners can relate with that. I think everyone has a memory where they had a heart to heart talk with someone over maybe like a burger or some pizza, right? Just kicking it at home with the pizza. So Chef Shar, when you talk about your food in writing, how it must be, you must have a way with words, right? You've written several successful books because when it comes to food, the first thing I think about is I want to see it, right? I want to see it on what it
Mm.
looks like, or even better, I want to smell it, I want to taste it. But if you're just writing about cooking, can you give us how your process is when it comes to writing about food, because it's a very visual thing for most people.
Yeah, it's actually very difficult. That's why it took me 2.5 years to write it. I
Mm-hmm.
think one of the things that I always try to do is I try to uh, describe the dish in such a way wherein you can picture it in your mind. So I try, if I can't remember the color of the plate, I try to remember how the dish looked, right? So where was it? Was it on the left side? Were the carrots on the right side? Um, where was there a lot of brown colors? Was there a lot of green colors? Um, and then I try to remember as many ingredients as I can in describing the dish, because I feel that when people read the ingredients, they sort of mentally create the dish in their mind. So it
Yeah.
really helps. Um, but the other thing I think is um, more important to me is to describe how I felt when I was eating that dish. I think that you can always be technical with your descriptions of food, but most people just want to know, how did you like it? Why did you like it? Um,
Mm.
and I mean, because sometimes you describe the dish, it's so technical, it's so lifeless. People are not going to be salivating over it. But when
Yeah.
you start to describe your personal feelings, like, oh, this dish, brought warmth to your heart, then people have an idea. Oh, this is a soul food dish, right? Because it's talking about
Mm.
warmth. So I try to concentrate on that, on how I feel, what it tasted like. That way, you can give the audience an experience without them, licking the page or anything.
I mean, since this is something that it took you 2.5 years to write, and so you said that you've been to all these places. You said that you learned 10 lessons from all these places that you've been to, but it must have been a while since we haven't been able to travel in recent years. So when you do these things, do you how do you kind of remember these things? Do you have a camera? Do you vlog it? Do you just take notes? Like what exactly is your thought memorizing process in this case?
Yeah, I'm lucky in the sense that a lot of the travels that I got to do in the past few years has been related to work. So meaning it's either been shot for a show or written down for an article. And so I can go back to these articles. I can go back to these videos and see the ingredients. But there are some, and I'm telling you, everybody, when you take the time to sit down, there are meals across your life, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that still sticks in your mind. And if you take the time to picture it, you're going to be able to write it all down, and you're going to be surprised at how much detail you're going to remember, just
Mm.
because that dish was so good.
Yeah.
One of the dishes I described here, I had when I was like 13 years old or something, right? I
Really?
didn't realize this dish, but when I started writing this chapter on Hong Kong, I was like, so do I start on my 2015 trip to Hong Kong? And then something in my mind was like, wait, in the early 90s, I went to Hong Kong. And I'm like, yeah. And then I remember this dish. And then I started
Mm.
writing. And then even the color of the plate came back to
Mm.
me. That's how crazy it was. Like, I remembered our server. I remembered everything just because I sat down and I said, I want to remember this dish because I know how it made me feel. I know what the dish was. I know how it made me feel. Now I tried to sit down and try to remember everything, picture myself back there, and it's crazy how a delicious food memory can just bring
Elicit all
everything.
these memories, these vivid memories from your past.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like one of those superhero movies, right? Like
Yeah,
where
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
like Professor X trying to
Right.
remember things. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
That's
But
awesome.
most of the book though is tied to my time with doing travel shows, right?
Yeah.
So I get to go back to the videos and check if I missed anything.
Mm. Speaking of, I mean, how is video creation nowadays for food shows and whatnot? Is there an existing industry at the moment, or are you like on a hiatus during the pandemic?
Well, for me,
Mm.
I'm trying to like master how to shoot in my kitchen because my kitchen at home isn't really wasn't really made for TV.
Right.
So, and I don't want to leave the house, so I'm trying to find a way to I don't know maybe it's move the ring light somewhere in a different area and see how I can
Angle
make
it
my kitchen.
correctly, right?
Yeah, so, I have to admit my kitchen is not as pretty as other people's, but
Mm.
I think I'm going to give up on the idea of making a pretty kitchen and just concentrate on just creating more recipes. Because I
Okay.
think now, especially in our country, I think there's really no timetable set for our vaccination and stuff. So if we're going to wait until we can shoot outside again, it's going to be too long. And
Right.
so now I'm just thinking about how to create on YouTube,
Mm.
um, you know, um, create food videos, create K drama videos, just to see if maybe the wave of the future is there, right?
Mm.
Maybe the future isn't on the cooking shows that I've done in the past where everything is picture perfect, the lighting is perfect.
Mm.
I've memorized the script and everything. Maybe now the time is to do something more casual, make a couple of mistakes and
Mm.
maybe the food doesn't look as great, but because of the lighting, but it's still good food, it's still a good recipe. So I'm still
Yeah.
learning.
Yeah.
And that's the exciting part, I think, is
Yeah.
learning this YouTube thing, and
Mm.
then I don't know if I'm brave enough, maybe TikTok or
Yeah, that's what I was gonna bring up, Chef Shar. Sometimes I'm scrolling through TikTok, so yeah, hours on TikTok, and I'll just come across a food video, and then it's another food video, and there are a lot of highly engaged cooking videos on there. Like it's insane, literally millions of views for like simple recipes or like how to cook this. I think you'd be a great TikToker, if you ask me.
I don't know. But I've been studying, on what I can bring, what kind of difference can I bring, right? That's
Mm,
always my thought. I mean, when I wrote this book, for example,
yeah.
the idea is, there's a lot of cookbooks out there,
Mm,
um, but there's not a lot of food literature, meaning there's not a lot of travel food stories, food culture, food history.
mhm.
So I figured, of course, there are over 40 recipes in this book, but I made sure to include, that the majority of the book isn't really just the recipes,
Right.
but, stories, food stories, culture stories, history
Mm,
stories that some people may miss, right? Like there's a chapter on Cavite, for example, and for us, Cavite is like an hour and a half away,
mhm.
and but there's so many things there, and it's crazy. Like when I went there in 2015, like there was so much food there that I hadn't even heard of.
Yeah.
So it's crazy, right? It's an hour and a
Mhm.
half away, and we've never tasted a lot of the
Yeah.
specialties. It's crazy. So
Yeah.
for me to write about an entire chapter about a province that's just an hour and a half away may sound, cuckoo, right? But there's a ton to discover there.
Yeah, I am in complete agreement. I feel like even in my family's from Pampanga, And sometimes we'll go to a Kapampangan restaurant now, like I don't know half of these. I feel like I've never tried half of these things on here, and I feel like I should. That is I guess a one of the great lessons that you that we could all learn from going and traveling to other places to eat food. You mentioned that you didn't plan it, but you had 10 lessons that you learned through. I know you can't. I don't want you to reveal everything, but is there like a maybe a sneak preview of maybe one lesson that you learned, and maybe some insights on how you did it, like what country was associated with that lesson, just so that our listeners can be like, oh, I've been there. Maybe I could learn this lesson too, or maybe I've learned this lesson as well.
Yeah, I think one of the more interesting ones would be Penang. Personally, my most personal chapter is the chapter on Vancouver. Um,
Vancouver,
but a very interesting chapter also is Penang, because
Malaysia.
Penang in Malaysia, yeah, because you know that it's one small island, but they consider it the food capital of Malaysia.
Mhm.
Um, so as if you've been to Malaysia anywhere else and you say, "Wow, this food is delicious," their automatic response is, "Wait till you taste it in Penang." Right?
Penang.
That's
Okay.
their normal reaction. And so when I was there, like very few Western franchises were open there. Like I barely saw a McDonald's. I think I saw one, right?
Right.
Um, and maybe one Italian restaurant, and
Mm.
that's it. You know, everything else was local. Um, and so when you eat there, it's like it's possible to eat there for a week and not to repeat.
Awesome.
And but you know, all of these restaurants are not fine dining. Like they absolutely don't care about how their plate looks. Like
Okay, that's like
they
me
just
at home.
they,
So we're
yeah,
fine.
they just throw stuff on the plate. One of my favorite dishes there is called the nasi kandar. Basically, it's like our rice meal, right? So it's rice. You pick two ulam, and they have a term called I can't remember the term now, but
Mhm.
kwa champur. So when you say kwa champur, they're gonna get sauce from the five different stews, right? And they're gonna pour it all over your plate. So one is salty, one is spicy, one is sweet. You know, it's a crazy mix of sauces, and they're not
Yeah.
measuring; they're just basically throwing it around. You know,
Nice.
uh, and so when you look at your plate, it looks like somebody stepped on your plate.
Mm.
That's what it looks like. Like it's brown, it's
Okay.
splattered everywhere, but man, it is so delicious,
Great.
so delicious. And so that is the common theme that I found in Penang, is that people honestly, they don't care how their dish looks.
They don't give a damn. Huh? They just want it to taste good. Eat it.
Yes, that's their motto, right? Like
Yeah.
taste is king.
Taste
Um,
is.
so as long as it tastes good, they'll buy it.
Who
uh,
cares what it looks
yeah,
like?
who cares how it looks like.
Yeah. I get a lot of crap from people who watch me eat at buffets, for example. I will pile like whatever onto my, like I'll put sushi on top of pizza and I'll just eat it all at the same, because it all tastes good to me. So I need to go to Penang. I need to
Oh
go
yeah,
there. Yeah. I
everyone
want
needs to go to Penang. The
Yeah, once the
food is
pandemic's over, that's probably gonna be my first destination, and it's all because of you, Chef. I'm serious. I'm gonna go book a ticket when it's possible already. So Chef Shar, when it comes to the title of your book once again is the Gospel of Food, the lessons I learned from eating across the world, and you in this book you show your insights, and when you go to different places you show why you learn these lessons. However, if someone was in your shoes, or let's talk about somebody else, let's say another chef from across the world comes here to the Philippines and decides to write a book about their life lessons, what kind of lessons do you think they would get from Filipino food? Because we on our last talk in October, we all know that you're a proud advocate of Filipino food. You're actually very particular in how Filipino food is presented. Actually, so first of all, before we move on to the aspect of the presentation of Filipino food across the world, let's talk about what life lessons you think a chef or just a traveler could learn from us, our Filipino cuisine.
I think what's most important for visitors to remember about the Philippines is we're very regionalistic. So they can't come to one place and say that I've figured out what Filipino food is. You
Mm.
have to go to each province and discover what their food is like. Like in my book, I have separate chapters. Now, one is on Pampanga, one is on um, Cavite. There are some chapters that have Cebu in it. So it's really very regionalistic. So for foreigners who want to learn about Filipino food, what you have to remember is when you come to a province, all you're learning about is the food from that province. You're not learning about the entire Filipino
Mm.
cuisine.
Yeah.
Um, and the most amazing thing, of course, I haven't finished this theory of mine, um, but my theory is that the dishes of that region actually define what the people are. Um, if you look to Pampanga, the food there is so flamboyant, so full of flavor,
Mm.
very heavy. Um, and that's because the province itself was the breadbasket. That's where all of the farming was. That's where the U.S. bases were.
Mm.
So of course the food there would reflect that, would reflect how, and of course the people there are very confident. They're very they believe in themselves. Um,
Yeah.
and so the food is the same, right? So it
Okay.
reflects the food reflects the people. I think that's the most important thing about Filipino cuisine is that
Yeah.
that region's food reflects that region's people. In
Hmm.
Rojas, for example, Rojas is like nobody talks about food from Rojas. Like everyone's like,
Okay.
why are you going there? Right? But that's
Mhm.
where every other region gets their seafood. Like all of the seafood you see in the market,
Raw.
70% is from Rojas. And so if you go there, people are like, yeah, why are you here? Why are you not in Iloilo or Bacolod?
Mm.
And you can see that in their cooking as well. Their cooking is very simple, very low key. Just steam and then steam the seafood and then there's sausaw and that's it. Very very simple food, but very delicious. And so again, that's very reflective of the people. Even the difference between the dishes of Bacolod and Iloilo, for example, even though they're neighboring regions and they have very similar food, the sensibilities are different.
Mm.
Bacolod is more fancy, Iloilo is less so, and that's because a lot of the rich families were in Bacolod, right? So
Mm.
again, it reflects the people.
The
Um,
people personalities.
yeah, so I think that's the most interesting thing about Filipino food is when you go to certain regions, you'll see why the food is this way.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that it's your personal theory, but has there been any sort of scientifical research done on this theory? I mean, you could be the mastermind behind it,
Well, I don't know how to scientifically prove it,
right?
uh, but there's got to be a way, right? Like,
Okay, I'm sure
I'm hoping some college student takes this as their thesis,
that'd be great.
um, because there's a lot. We have a lot of great food historians, like
Mhm.
Feliz Santa Maria, Ige Ramos. They've written books about food from certain provinces, and I think that when you start to compare, you're gonna realize that my theory is has some merit.
Mhm.
The more you study each region, the problem is we have so many regions and so many
Yes.
cuisines.
Mhm.
But I think if somebody is just hardworking enough to create a thesis on this, I
Yeah.
think my point will be proven because I mean everywhere in the world they keep saying you are what you eat,
Mhm.
but I think especially so here in the Philippines,
The
like
Philippines. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, it really shows your. I mean, just from listening to you talk about Filipino food, it's obvious your passion for our cuisine. It's very strong. It's like a burning passion, and you've been. And we mentioned it a little bit earlier. I wanted to get more insights from you. You've been very critical about the way we present our food to foreigners, right? Filipino food to foreigners. Could you just share your how you think we should share our food to the world? The best way to share it.
I think there's a couple of things. I think we're already improving. I think number one, the one thing we have to avoid is we have to stop giving first time visitors fear factor food, right? Like
Balut.
like balut, dinuguan,
Yeah.
papaitan. They're all delicious. Don't get me
Right.
wrong, but
Yeah.
if that foreigner only has one meal here or two meals here, and one of them is balut, when they
Yeah.
go home, that's the only thing they remember.
Yeah.
Um, I remember a few years ago, Zac Efron came here, um, and so when he went back to the States, I think it was on Ellen, um, on a talk show. They asked him about his time in the Philippines, and there's only two things he remembered. One was he was brought to Mayon to do the four-wheel drive on
ATV. Yeah.
ATV,
Mm-hmm.
and the other is somebody gave him balut.
Nice.
And immediately I was like face
Oh
palm,
no.
right? Like look at that. The only two
Right.
things he remembered from the trip, right? Beautiful volcano and fertilized duck embryo. So that's not really the best way to sell our country. It might
Yeah.
be what our country has, but we
Yeah.
don't necessarily like. If you go to like Thailand, they
Mm.
sell fried insects, right?
Yes.
But when they meet their guests, what they serve them is pad thai, curry,
Uh, yeah.
and tom yum goong, right? That's
Mm.
what they serve. That's their triumvirate.
Yeah.
And the fried crickets they'll tell you about later on, right?
Right.
They have their own version of a blood stew. I think they even use like Vietnam has a blood stew where the blood isn't even cooked, right?
Wow.
But nobody
Oh.
talks about that because
Exactly.
that's
People
not
talk banh mi. People.
yeah, they
People.
sell you the
That's
banh
kind of
mi and the
scary.
pho, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I think for us, that's what we have to remember. If you've got a visitor here that's only here for like 2 days, 3 days, the best thing to do is to serve
Right.
them the best of the best, right? The
Yeah.
easiest to remember.
Yeah.
Sisig, lechon,
Yes.
adobo, pancit. Pancit is
That's,
always a crowd pleaser.
yes.
Lumpiang Shanghai is always a crowd pleaser,
Oh yeah.
because it's very easy to understand. It's fried egg rolls, it's chow mein. It's very easy for them to
Yeah.
understand. Pork
Conceptualize.
barbecue, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my one tip. The other is just I think we have to stop serving foreigners foreign food. Like if you
Ah,
go to the best beaches, because that's where they're gonna go, right? Like as
yeah.
much as we'd like them to visit the city,
Mm,
most of them would probably visit, um, you know, Boracay
okay.
or Palawan, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of these places they still serve the generic. It's okay to serve Italian food with Filipino ingredients. That would be great.
Mm.
But a lot of them are still making what chicken cordon bleu, and carbonara with cream, which you shouldn't do. These are things that they don't really want. That I mean, they traveled 16 hours to come here, and then you're
Yes.
gonna serve them that, right? So I think that um, there should be a focus in when we can travel again for our
Mm.
resorts to really highlight the local cuisine, the local ingredients in the local cuisine. Because honestly, like when I go to Thailand, for example, I'm not going to go there and ask them where I can get Hard Rock Cafe or something, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
want a burger. I'm going to
Right.
Thailand and I'm going to eat the spiciest papaya salad I can find.
Nice.
Right? So I think we should do that too. I think that if we're in, for example, in Palawan, then we should highlight the seafood that you find there.
Mm.
And because we have a huge Vietnamese population in Palawan, we can incorporate Vietnamese food in in Palawan food, right?
Mm.
But when you're in Boracay, for example, or even like let's say Cebu, right? There are
Mm.
plenty of Cebu dishes. Cebu is more than just lechon. So a lot of these Cebu resorts should look into Cebuano food and start highlighting that. Nilarang, for example, their fish stew is tremendous.
Yeah.
Um, and they should highlight that, instead of making a chicken cordon bleu. I know I'm really attacking chicken cordon bleu, although I like it.
What's wrong with chicken cordon bleu?
But you just keep having it, like in weddings, in airports, in airplanes. It's always there. It's like
True, it is. It is
it's
at every
possible,
wedding. It's at
right?
every wedding I've been to.
And it's possible to eat it, and then you're gonna go, where am I? Right? You're not sure where you are when you're eating it. So
Right. That's a great tip, chef. So we're coming towards the end of the the interview because we gotta let you have your time to do what to watch your K dramas after this, I'm sure. But since we are on the topic, maybe to end on a hopeful note, when people travel, once traveling becomes commonplace once again for everybody, what should they do in order to enjoy a meal in a foreign country to the fullest? What are your tips, especially if it's a dish that they've never tried before? First of all, how would you select the? What would you? How would you help them choose? Like, actually, let's just walk from your shoes, Chef Sharwin. When you go to a different country, what is your thought process when trying something new, so that our listeners who do travel once again in the future, they could maybe take a lesson from you.
well, I think the first thing to do is to study what that place makes. So, for example, if you go to Japan, you know that sushi is going to be king, right? So,
Yeah.
what you can do is start researching on the different blogs on where the best sushi place is going to be. And you can't rely on just one blog, right?
Mm.
You got to look at 5 or 6 different blogs and see if there's a certain restaurant that appears on all 5 of them. Then that's probably something that's really good.
Very.
Um, and the other thing is, what I do is when I plan my trip, I plan all my meals. Right? I research and I'm like, okay, breakfast. Let's look for what's the traditional breakfast of this place, and then I go
Mm.
search where they make the best of this version. Like for example, in Macau, they make a pork chop sandwich. So the first thing I did before going there was to type in best pork chop sandwich in Macau, and then I read 6 different blogs to see. Okay, I think 4 of them said one place, 2 of them said the other. So I'm like,
Mm.
okay, I have 2 days, so I can go to both places,
Right there.
right? Because it's just one sandwich.
Fair
But at
enough.
least you can plan it. Um, and then I always leave one meal open, at least one meal open, because sometimes you're just walking around and you smell something delicious and you just got to go in and eat.
I love
I
it.
think that's a very underrated thing to do, which is you can plan for everything but leave one meal open, just in case you're walking around, you see a line, you see people lining up. Hey, that might be a good place to eat. Um,
Nice.
and yeah, Bourdain always says it, right? If it's on
Yeah.
the street and all the people that are lining up are all locals, you should probably line up. It's probably good.
There we go. I mean, that's a fantastic lesson that we just learned from you, and I'm sure our listeners could learn a lot more from reading everything that you put out, watching everything you put out. But once again, Chef, can you tell us where they can find your latest book, so that they can also learn the lessons that you have learned from traveling across the world? The Gospel of Food: Lessons I Learned from Eating Across the World. Where can they pick up a copy of that?
Yes, so these are already in bookstores, but we don't like to go out these days, so you can definitely order online at anvilpublishing.com, or you can also order on Shopee and Lazada. And if you're an ebook reader, you can also order it on Amazon.com. So this is my first book that's available around the world, so I'm very excited. So if you've got relatives living abroad, please give them this book as a gift. I think they're gonna appreciate it. Um, and then you can also get my other book, So You Want to Be a Chef, through the same stores, Shopee, Lazada, and anvilpublishing.com. And we're launching the book this Saturday. It'll be on the Facebook page of Anvil Publishing. And right after that opening, when you order the book, and you're early enough, you can get one of the signed copies. So there's limited edition signed copies that you can.
Hey.
So definitely order yours during this weekend.
Great. Congratulations, Chef Sharwin Tee. We really appreciate you. Of course, every time you come on the show, it's always we learn so much from you. and it's always a great time when you're on here. Do you want to say hello to any of our monsters out there, your fans, your friends, your family? Any shout outs that you have out there?
Yeah, I just want to greet everyone who's come on board and joined us. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed our interview because I definitely enjoyed it. I didn't realize that an hour has passed. Uh,
Likewise.
and I just want to give a shout out to my Day Off Mondays family, and my Sinigang podcast mates, and my manager, Narciso Chan, always looking out for me. And of course, everyone who's been subscribing to my YouTube channel and been watching my shows. Thank you so much. You guys are the reason why I do it.
Love it. Thank you very much, Chef Sharwin Tee. And I told you in October of last year, we hope to see you here in person. We're one step closer. I'm here in the booth. So maybe the next time we'll be face to face. And yeah, I'm going to go to Penang because of you. It's all because of you.
Definitely, definitely. You gotta
Tag
go.
you in the Instagram story. Look where you made me go, Chef Sharwin. And we'll see you on TikTok. Huh? The next time we interview, you're going to have 100,000 million followers on TikTok. All
I
right.
hope so. I hope so.
Yeah. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us here on Heard on Thursdays. Join us again next week for more hot conversations here on Heard on Thursdays. My name is JC Tevez. Have a wonderful evening and always keep it locked in here on Manila's hottest Monster RX 93.1.
The show that made Philippine FM radio